This video will explain and list the advantages and disadvantages of two creative and two critical thinking theories. It will then go on to explain and compare the theories and list their similarities and differences. The two creative thinking theories that will be examined are de Bono's six thinking hats and the theory of divergent and convergent thinking, and the two critical theories are Bloom's taxonomy and making the familiar strange. First, we will examine the creative theories, starting with de Bono's six thinking hats. The six thinking hats is a theory aimed to enable users to think laterally and encourage creativity. The theory involves the wearing of six metaphorical hats, which are different colours. Each hat is a representative of different ways of thinking, and when the user puts on the hat, they are to adopt a way of thinking from the perspective of that hat. The six hats are as follows. The black hat is judgmental. The yellow hat remains optimistic and sees benefits. The white hat calls for facts and is emotionally neutral. The red hat is emotional. The green hat is creative. And the blue hat represents process-based thinking and is worn by the facilitator at all times. While wearing a hat, the user is meant to only think of the problem from that point of view. So when should you use the six thinking hats? It is best used in a team environment when you have multiple people to wear the different hats. It is most useful when a group has a default way of thinking when faced with a problem and they struggle to think outside of this way. The advantages of using this method include you can limit the hats used to only the ones that you need, and there is a set structure which provides helpful cues to encourage outside thinking. Despite the advantages, the six thinking hats also have some disadvantages, including the theory works best with more than one person, aka a team, and a facilitator is recommended, i.e. the person who wears the blue hat. This may limit the usefulness of the theory for individuals or smaller groups, for example, 2 or 3 people. Not all hats apply to all problems and is not always useful to gain perspective from every hat. It is a long process and very time-consuming, and the outcome depends on how open-minded people are and can cause problems such as arguments in certain circumstances. The next creative theory is divergent and convergent thinking. These are two separate ways of thinking that need to be used together to be effective. Divergent thinking is the process of being open-minded and exploring multiple solutions to a problem. On the other hand, convergent thinking is the process of thinking through the possibilities created in divergent thinking and weighing them up against each other in an attempt to find the best solution. For this creative theory to be effective, divergent thinking should be the first completed of the two to try and think of as many solutions to a problem as possible while aiming to be spontaneous and creative. Once you have the possible answers from divergent thinking, the learner should then move to convergent thinking as they attempt to find the most effective solution to the problem. Advantages of divergent and convergent thinking include divergent thinking gets you thinking outside the box and creating new and exciting ideas. It generates alternative solutions to fall back on if the chosen problem doesn't work in practice. The disadvantages include two ways of thinking isn't always applicable. For example, it may not be useful in some situations, such as finding the answer to multiple choice questionnaires. If you only perform one way of thinking without the other, it is not effective. You may end up having too many solutions, but are unable to choose which one, or you focus on one solution without the creativity of thinking of alternatives. And finally, there is no set framework to apply and no step-by-step instruction as to how to conduct each type of thinking. Therefore, users may become stumped in the process. There are some similarities between these two creative theories, including they both encourage thinking outside the box and from different perspectives. They both encourage creating multiple solutions to a problem and then finding the most appropriate solution. And they both have their own place for when they should be used and are not an apply to all fix for all problems. Both can have visual aids created. On the other hand, the differences between the two theories include de Bono's six thinking hats has a clear framework and uses cues to assist the user to encourage different ways of thinking, while divergent and convergent thinking does not have a clear framework that is used in the same sense. De Bono's is better suited for teamwork and groups, while divergent and convergent thinking can be used for either individual or group work. Now are the two critical thinking theories, the first being Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a pyramid consisting of 6 tiers which categorises the levels of cognitive skills of a learner, aka a critical thinker. The 6 levels in the taxonomy from bottom to top are knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. As a critical thinker, the aim is to attempt to move up the levels, hoping to reach the top tier. This theory is used to deepen the thinking of the learner when faced with a problem. The advantages of using this method include: it can be used not only to improve your skills, but also help to evaluate the level of critical thinking you are currently at. It helps you to ask more questions and probe further into an issue. And finally, it can be particularly useful for groups where a leader is applying the theory to attempt to move the group ideas from knowledge to synthesis. Despite the advantages, Bloom's taxonomy also has some disadvantages, including it may be difficult and is usually very time-consuming to move up the tiers. Also, most of the language for the theory is written for teachers to apply to their students, as this was the original purpose of the theory. However, despite this, the pyramid is still very useful. Individuals argue that for certain circumstances, the pyramid is upside down, e.g. for a history class where knowledge is the goal. Another criticism is that the pyramid's visualization sets knowledge at the very bottom and therefore de-emphasizes the importance of the basics. The second critical theory is making the familiar strange. This theory encourages the user to suspend the familiar to avoid biases or norms and create a new way of thinking to make an everyday thing or activity seem strange and unfamiliar. The purpose of this is to reintroduce new ways of thinking of things that are seen every day, to try and spark creativity. Making the familiar strange can be facilitated by adopting the point of view of an open-minded person who attempts to think freely and without the constraints of biases and social norms. It is used to encourage critical thinking and deepen the thought process for everyday things. The advantages of this method include: it creates flexible thinking and provides a deeper insight into everyday occurrences, removes biases and norms to make you forget your assumptions, encourages people to stop seeing what is obviously there and create fresh ideas, may be useful to revisit a previous issue that has resurfaced and may need a new solution. The disadvantages for making the familiar strange include: some people find it difficult if they are not a visual person. The theory does not have a lot of structure or cues to follow and therefore may be difficult to use in practice. It can be a difficult way of thinking to adapt in older ages. It is predominantly an individual's tool and is difficult to use in groups. It's sometimes said that the familiar is a good thing, and if you know well and do well, therefore you are wasting your time by making it strange again. There are some similarities between these two critical thinking theories, including they are both useful for individuals and they both involve reshaping how you think and encourage deeper thought and insight. The differences between the two theories include: Bloom's taxonomy has a more set out framework and is able to be visually represented. Making the familiar strange has limits as it requires the issue to be already familiar, whereas Bloom taxonomy can be widely used. In conclusion, the two creative thinking theories are quite different in their structures and how they are applied to a situation. The 6 thinking hats is best applied to groups and has a very clear framework and includes cues for the learner, while convergent and divergent thinking is very open and does not provide a clear direction as to how to come up with the different answers. Despite this clear difference, both theories aim to have the user develop strong critical thinking skills and to develop multiple solutions for a problem before deciding the best one. This may be time-consuming in both circumstances, but will create a much better outcome. The two critical thinking theories are similar in the way that they both encourage a different way of thinking and encourage a deeper thought process. However, they are mostly different from one another, as Bloom's taxonomy uses a set framework, whereas making the familiar strange is quite open for interpretation as to how it can be applied by the user.